Good morning. Apparently it says the live stream's not working, but from my side, everything looks legit. We should be live. This is an interesting topic where, emotions run high, where there are mixed feelings, both from drivers and riders, passengers alike. The laws are very clear state by state on the gun laws, right? Uber officially bans the drivers from carrying firearms, but at the end of the day, the company's business model prevents it from enforcing such a ban. And many cases have gone to the courts. There's one very interesting story that was reported in The Atlantic. I want to read the story to you. It's so bizarre, the ending. Mario, how are you? By the way, guys, go to the video or email me. February the 23rd, Long Beach party, RSVP, please. Very important, RSVP for the Long Beach party. So the story is, I want to read you the story because I really want you to sort of be the judge or hear your input on this. The driver's name was Michael Wallace. He was 37, a Kentucky native, engaged to be married, a father of four. He drove a brand new Nissan Pathfinder in Cayenne red, and he kept a handgun, a birthday present from his father, in the driver's side door pocket. So he kept it in the driver's side door pocket, right? In the course of more than 4,600 trips driving for Uber, he had never used his gun, and then he did. A little after 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, August the 4th, 2018, Uber routed Wallace to a Louisville Marriott to pick up a group of 5. We know those type of pickups. One of them was John Strand. Strand was in town from Indianapolis as part of his work at a company specializing in window installation. His wife, Natalie, a stay-at-home mom to their 3 kids, accompanied him. That Saturday, John, Natalie, and 3 of John's co-workers met in the Marriott lobby, planning to head to a nearby bourbon distillery where Strand's company had made a dinner reservation. Someone ordered an Uber, okay? Up to now, it's a typical story. We know this, right? A few minutes later, Wallace pulled into the Marriott parking lot. The group piled in, but they had a last-minute request before leaving. Another co-worker wanted to ride along with them. Could Wallace rearrange the back seat to accommodate a 6th person? This is a typical story. You and I have all been in this situation, right? Can we just squeeze another one in? Can we just put another driver in? A few minutes later, so John Strand says Wallace protested furiously. The request, Wallace argued, was for a group of 5. And Uber's app doesn't allow for adding extra passengers to a ride already in progress. According to Strand, when the group offered to tip in cash for the extra passenger, Wallace accused them of trying to take advantage of him, right? This is a scenario that many people know, right? The group hadn't even left the hotel's pickup spot when he ordered them all out of the car. At this point, there's a problem waiting to happen, right? He puts his foot down. He says, get out. After this, Strand's memory blurs. I never saw the first punch coming, he told me recently over the phone. Strand recalls blows to the face, blood on his arms, and pleading from his wife and co-workers as he and Wallace fought in the lot just outside the hotel. This part, my friends, was completely unnecessary, right? Then, according to the Strands, Wallace retreated to the car and fished out his gun. Just wanted to know if the live feed is working. If any, Mario, can you just verify that you're following the live feed? We have, what time is it now? It's shortly before 11. So Then, according to the Strands, Wallace retreated to the car and fished out his gun, later determined to have been loaded with 7 live rounds. One of the passengers broke away to call 911. We've got an Uber driver who's got a gun, says the 9/11 recording obtained by The Atlantic. We need help, right? So passenger calls 911 and says the driver has a gun. Strand wrestled the gun from Wallace, tossed it away, and pinned him to the ground. It wasn't like Jackie Chan, Strand told me. It was rolling on the ground, hoping you don't get shot in the face, and doing everything you can the whole time to see my little 5-year-old again. As Strand restrained him, Wallace started to gasp. He told the group he couldn't breathe. Strand's co-worker placed a second 911 call. Wallace was in cardiac arrest. So while they're fighting, the driver now goes into cardio arrest, now lying limp in the Marriott's parking lot. Over speakerphone, an operator coached Strand and his co-workers on how to perform CPR as they waited for first responders to arrive. It's a bizarre, bizarre story. Wallace died in the hospital 3 days later. He didn't have life insurance through driving. Uber offers only third-party liability insurance, which isn't the same as traditional employer-sponsored coverage. So a family friend created a GoFundMe campaign to support Wallace's fiancé and kids. Through their estate attorney, Wallace family declined an interview's request. In a GoFundMe thanking donors, his fiancé wrote, "There are a lot of people, not just us, who love Mike very much." The Wallace family was mourning. The Louisville Metro Police Department was investigating his death as a potential homicide. Though the autopsy determined that the cardiac arrest was triggered by the struggle, police ultimately found that Strand's force that evening was justified. Police closed their investigation and Strand returned to Indianapolis. But in a recent phone call, he described the abiding anxiety that started after the incident: flashbacks, nightmares, a parade of counseling sessions. He told me he was diagnosed with PTSD in the midst of the 4-month homicide investigation, during which he had to retell his story again and again. Eventually, he left his job and devoted himself to recovery. I'll put the link down below so you can also read it if you wish. In August, Strand found an outlet for his feelings. He filed a lawsuit against Uber, claiming that Wallace should have never been hired. According to court documents in 2004, Wallace had pleaded guilty to menacing, a Class B misdemeanor that should have required him to forfeit any and all guns in his possession. And the suit alleges disqualified him from being hired by Uber in 2016. Strand's lawsuit also argues that in promising a thorough background check of all drivers, Uber grossly misrepresented the safety of its product. Finally, and perhaps most consequentially, Strand's lawsuit asserts that Michael Wallace was a full-time employee, not just a contractor, as Uber describes its drivers, making the company liable for his actions that night. Now, Strand's case is still pending while his lawyers await a court date. Uber's representatives declined multiple requests for comment on the record for this article, but in email to The Atlantic, they noted that the company has added new safety features to the app and updated its background check system for drivers. Wallace's death and Strand's lawsuit crystallize a central paradox of the gig economy since its inception. Uber, like its peers in the rideshare market, has itself minimally responsible for the massive held itself minimally responsible for its massive workforce of contractors that propelled it to a multi-billion-dollar valuation. So the editor already acknowledges that we propelled this company to a multi-billion-dollar valuation. However, it takes minimal responsibility responsibility for the massive workforce of contractors, even as walkouts, lawsuits, and contested legal judgments have challenged his stance. Now, in Uber's formal response, listen to this, in Uber's formal response to Strand's lawsuit, it not only denied that Wallace, the driver, was an employee, it denied that any driver is. Uber does not hire drivers, and therefore there are no Uber drivers and users of the Uber app. They are not Uber riders. Its response to the suit reads, rather, Uber calls itself an intermediary, a platform that connects who needs rides with independent contractors who drive cars. It refers to itself as a technology company in the document and states flatly that it does not perform any transportation service. I think on that one they're dead wrong. But if drivers like Wallace are indeed contractors, Uber cannot override state laws in places like Kentucky, which give citizens the right to carry guns in their own cars. Let me repeat that. But if drivers like Wallace are indeed contractors, Uber cannot override state laws in places like Kentucky, which give citizens the right to carry guns in their own cars. Strand's suit argues that Uber's self-perception is itself a danger to riders, one that both allows the company to shield itself from liability and prevents it from controlling for what happens when drivers disregard its rules. And as it turns out, drivers do break the rules. So Uber has banned, thank you. Uber has banned guns in cars for both drivers and passengers since 2015. But over email and Facebook Messenger, 4 current and 4 former drivers told me they carry firearms on the job. In explaining why, they each cited the same self-determinalist rhetoric Uber has slapped on subway ads to entice drivers and used in hearings to justify the business model. Drivers maintain good ratings, own their own cars, set their own hours, act as their own bosses, and follow local laws. But ultimately, they work for themselves. And Uber is, to use a Silicon Valley term of art, just a platform. So let them ban guns, a Las Vegas Uber driver told me. They can't enforce it. Like many other drivers I spoke with, he told me he believes the company has effectively traded its right to enforcement for the cost savings associated with employing contractors. Ultimately, I don't think it's Uber's responsibility to make anyone feel safe, he continued. My safety is my responsibility, said this Las Vegas Uber driver. Uber is a software company. Their responsibility is the app. In 2017, Jose Maya of Miami, Florida, a Miami driver, filed a federal class action suit against Uber to reverse its firearm ban. Florida's 2008 Bring Your Own Gun to Work law empowers employees to store legal firearms in personal lockers or their own cars. With Uber, of course, the car is the workplace. Mayer claimed that Uber's policy violated Florida law, and citing an incident in which an Uber driver with a concealed carry license shot and disarmed a Chicago gunman, argued that arming Uber drivers could save lives. But Mayer couldn't prove that Uber violated his rights. He hadn't been fired or threatened with suspension. The company had announced a ban, yes, but never materially stopped him from carrying a firearm. The Florida court dismissed the suit without prejudice in 2018. Here we have a uniquely American absurdity. Drivers can carry guns to work, to bar, to a supermarket, but not in their own cars, while using the app to transport passengers. Like Mayer, they exist in the space between name and effect, adherent to ban with little practical enforcement. I follow all state laws, said a driver in Utah, which, like Florida, permits drivers to carry loaded weapons in their own cars. They can deactivate me, but in the event I need a firearm, that's irrelevant to me staying on the platform. Only one of the drivers I spoke with, Mark DeAndre, told me he'd been deactivated or faced any enforcement from Uber for carrying a weapon. DeAndre, who is from Detroit, told me he was fired this summer after a passenger reported a handgun in his car. He says he protested, noting to Uber his concealed carry license and clean driving record. His account, he told me, was still deactivated. So that's an interesting one if DeAndre from Detroit would carry that case further, right? Like many other drivers, DeAndre noted that he puts himself at considerable risk, financial and physical, to drive for Uber and needs a weapon to protect himself. Muggings and carjackings against Uber drivers are uncommon, but not unheard of. None of the armed drivers I talked to had been attacked, but they had each described a feeling of intense vulnerability, driving alone and often in areas they're unfamiliar with to locations unknown. In Detroit, just being in the wrong area at the wrong time of day or night in the right car could be a danger for you, DeAndre said via Facebook Messenger, especially seeing that Uber requires you to have a newer car in good condition to drive for them, which heightens the possibility of being a target. Even when drivers are armed, they never use their weapons. Safety incidents, as Uber describes them, are rare, but Strand's case shows how guns can turn rare cases of conflict into catastrophes. We're dealing with real people, real family, not numbers, not percentages, Strand said. I'd want Uber to know the personal ramifications. If the customers aren't safe, the results are devastating. Strand's lawsuit follows the same argument used by labor advocates and researchers that Uber's system, which uses algorithms to manage drivers' ride loads, is a form of control that should designate it as an employer. The clashes with how the company presents itself in legal filings as merely a platform used by drivers who themselves provide transportation. There's all these little ways in which Uber breaks down drivers, true independence, and stops them from making real informed decisions about their jobs they take. Alex Rosenblatt, an ethnographer and researcher studying the gig economy, told me. Software monitors drivers' every move, and the app nudges them to take certain rides. Until 2016, drivers could be suspended or terminated for a ride acceptance rate below 80%. After 2019, National Labor Relations Board's memo noted that the company limited drivers' selection of trips and established fares. Uber announced its Uber Pro service, which incentivized high acceptance rates by offering extra rewards for drivers with higher ratings. Earlier this month, California's Assembly Bill AB 5 went into effect. The legislation sets new standards about how companies designate contractors and employees. Uber is currently fighting the measure in court, calling it irrational and unconstitutional. But in the meantime, the company has slowly begun testing features that offer more transparency for drivers, including giving them the ability to see a rider's requested destination and how much they'd make from a specific trip before accepting it. The bill's author, California Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, argues that Uber is hesitant to adopt reclassification, in part because it would have to assume greater responsibility for the actions of its drivers than if they remain contractors. Liability is one of the big unspoken about issues here, she told the Washington Post. In response, Uber's spokesman Noah Edwardson told the Post that liability for safety incidents has simply never been part of Uber's arguments or strategy around AB 5. By emphasizing driver autonomy, Uber has fine-tuned its service to avoid the exact liability that Strand is seeking. It's true that many drivers pursue the job as secondary income, but many work 40 hours more a week and use it as their primary family income. These are the people that Uber can assert enormous control over without issuing the direct mandates we associate with traditional employment. The leverage Uber has over drivers, tacit, algorithmic, or otherwise, has limits. And when drivers decide that they need a weapon to defend themselves, the economic trade-offs between liability, classification, and autonomy seem tangential. In states where firearms are legally framed as the owner's right, drivers need only follow the rhetorical path Uber has laid for them. Uber's business model depends on drivers' independence, but stumbles when drivers choose to exercise it. Really interesting article. I mean, very long-winded. I'll put the link down below, right? And just read up about it, share your feelings about the issue of guns, right? The bottom line is, says, Uber officially banned the drivers from carrying firearms, but company's business model prevents it from enforcing such a ban. How do you feel about this? I would welcome your input. Thank you. Thank you for the people that are watching. Have a great day.